Hi, today we are working on 11.3, the quadratic formula. I would like you guys to look over the how we actually derive the quadratic formula, and we did that through completing the square. This is the quadratic formula, and this is how we are going to solve all our quadratic equations today. Remember that your quadratic equation must be in standard form, where A is any number but 0, and everything must be on one side of the equation, as the quadratic equation must be equal to 0. The formula is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Your a is the number in front of the quadratic term, your b is the number in front of the linear term, and your c is your constant. All right, let's go ahead and get started with that today. First of all, when you use the quadratic formula, if you guys notice that they share something, if all three terms share a number, you can actually factor that out immediately. Just divide it out of the entire problem. Now, if they don't share anything, not a big deal, just plug and chug numbers. So the first thing you're going to do is we have 4x squared minus 11x minus 3 equals 0. It is in standard form. The quadratic equation is in standard form. You need to tell me what a is, b is, and what c is. A is the number in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x. C is your constant, which is negative 3. Your formula is this: x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, I highly recommend that you write the formula down, especially until you get used to using it, and put it right on your desk so that you can look at where the a's are, where the b's are, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here where b is. B is negative 11. B is negative 11. Let me put my timer on. And a is 4. And a is 4. And c is negative 3. So once you have put in all the numbers where they're supposed to be, now it's order of operations. So what I'm going to do is a negative times a negative 11 is a positive 11 plus or minus the square root. A negative 11 squared is 121. A negative 4 times negative 3. If you're ever in doubt, let's use the calculator. So 4 times 4 times 3. That gives you 48. And it's going to be a positive 48 because a negative times a negative is a positive. All over 8. So now, once again, what's under the radical, you're going to add those together. So we have 11 plus or minus the square root of, and 121 plus 48, just to make sure I don't mess up anything, I get 169. All over 8. Now, our goal is to find out what x is. Now, on this, you're going to simplify the square root of 169, which is 13. All over 8. Now, before you guys do anything, because of the numerators, I can add those two numbers together. I highly recommend you do this. My two answers are going to be 11 plus 13 over 8, or x equals 11 minus 13 over 8. You want to simplify it. 11 plus 13 is 24, and 24 divided by 8 is 3. So that's one answer. Over here, I get x equals, let me go ahead and put x here, just so that you guys can see it. That gives me a negative 2, I believe, over 8. When you simplify that fraction, negative 2 goes into negative 2 once, so that would be a negative 1 in the numerator, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. So your answer would be 3 and negative 1/4. Let's try one more. And once again, If you are solving with the quadratic formula, everything must be on one side of the equation and it must be equal to 0. So on this one here, I need to move the 14x over because I need it to be equal to 0. So I'm going to do that, and I'm left with 2x squared minus 14x plus 19 equals 0. So the first thing you always ask yourself, what is A? What is B? And what is C? The A is the number in front of the x squared. The B is the number in front of the x. And the C is just the constant. That's 19. Again, have your formula on your desk so you know where everything is. And my answer, or my formula, is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, I'm going to put the b in here, and that is a negative 14. My b is negative 14. My a is 2. My a is 2. And my c is 19. So I end up with a negative times a negative is a positive 14. Plus or minus the square root. 14 squared is, I believe, 196, but I'm not 100% sure. So 14 times 14 gives me 196. Perfect. Now, 4 times 2 times 19 equals a negative 152. Okay? So, I'm just going to double check that one more time. 19 times 2 times a negative 4. Yeah, it's a negative 152. And then in the denominator, 2 times 2 is 4. So I end up with 14 plus or minus the square root. Now, I have 196 minus 152, and that gives me a positive 44 all over 4. So I end up with x equals 114 plus or minus all over 4. Now, if I can square root and simplify the square root of 44, I know that the square root of 4 times the square root of 11 is the square root of 44. The square root of 4 is 2. So I'm left with 2 square roots of 11. So this is going to be 2 square roots of 11. Now, before we move on, you need to look at everything on the outside of the radical. We have a 14 here, we have a 2 here, and we have a 4 here. If they happen to share something, you want to factor that out. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 14 7 times. 2 goes into 4 twice. So you're going to end up with 7 plus or minus the square root of 11 all over 2. And that's your answer. Now remember, you guys, just in case your guys' homework, your answer could be 7 plus the square root of 11 over 2, or it could be 7 minus the square root of 11 over 2. Just so that you're aware of, they're both the same answer. All right, let's move to the next one. The next problem, just like what we had in 11.2, you cannot just start solving the problem right now. You must expand x plus 5 times x plus 1. You have to multiply those two together before you move the 10x over, because you have to have it set equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to multiply these two together, and it gives me x squared. I'm going to multiply these two together, and that gives me x. I'm going to multiply 5 times x, which gives me 5x. I'm going to multiply 5 times 1, which gives me 5. I'm going to combine like terms. I'm left with x squared plus 6x plus 5. I got 6x because x plus 5x is 6x equals 10x. Now, because I have to have this set equal to 0, I'm going to move the 10x over. So I'm going to minus 10x from both sides. I'm going to minus 10x from both sides. And I'm left with x squared minus 4x plus 5 equals 0. So now, you guys, we have it in a quadratic equation in standard form. I always like to make sure that my a is positive, and it is. So you're going to say a is equal to something, b is equal to something, and c is equal to something. A is the number in front of the x squared, that is 1. B is negative 4 because that's the number in front of the x. Your c is 5. So once again, you use that same formula. The formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All you're doing is plug and chugging now. Your b is negative 4. Your a is 1. Your c is 5. So you're left with a negative times a negative is a positive, plus or minus. Negative 4 squared is 16 minus 20 all over 2. I got 20 because negative 4 times 1 times 5 equals 4 plus or minus. You must complete what's under the radical, and that's going to give you a negative 4 all over 2. Now remember from before, negative 4 is the same thing as 4 times the square root of negative 1. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of negative 1 is I. Remember, square root of negative 1 is I. I squared is equal to negative 1. Those are imaginary numbers. So you're going to end up with 4 plus or minus 2i all over 2. Now here's the important part. If they all have a number that they all share a 2. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. So your actual answer is going to be 2 plus or minus I all over, well, it's all over 1. So you can just say 2 plus or minus I, and that would be your answer.